Thank you for attending the Generation Green 2021 Youth Conference. The following session is brought to you by Gabriella Kalapos, who is from the Clean Air Partnership. Gabriella will be presenting a session on municipal climate change. Please enjoy.
Hi, everybody. I'm just going to turn my computer on. Hi, everybody. My name is Gabriella. I am from the Clean Air Partnership, and I just wanted to tell you a little bit of a story of Municipal Climate Action, where we are right now and where we need to go. So a little bit about Clean Air Partnership. We're a charitable environmental organization, and our goal is to help municipalities and their partners to help them implement clean air and climate change actions. One of the key areas and the ways that we go about doing this is that we, as each municipality undertakes a clean air climate change action, we get them to share what they've done with all the other municipalities. And then we ask them if one of you can do it, what would stop all of you from doing it? And then we kind of pool resources and bring the collective brain power together, identify all the issues, and then work collectively to identify interventions for how we're going to address them. A little bit about myself in the environmental sector. I've been working on clean air and climate change for over 20 years. Really, I've tried to put a lot of emphasis on helping to build partnerships across levels of government from the federal, provincial, and municipal level, also bringing NGOs and bringing partnerships between government and NGOs, as well as kind of bringing private sector from businesses and together. Really, one of the key things that I've learned on this year is that we are stronger together, and not any one sector can solve this problem on its own. We need to have an all of government and all of society approach in order to be able to meet the challenge of the climate change challenge ahead of us. So one of the key things that I really wanted to kind of share with you about the story, the climate change story, is that climate actions are good for our communities. They make our communities better places to live. They're kind of improving the efficiency of moving people and services and products around. They'll help local economic development and make our communities more livable, competitive, and resilient. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about how that we go about doing that. And I think one of the key things I also wanted to highlight in Ontario in particular, but I think this goes across all different countries, although there will be some differences, like let's say in Alberta and Saskatchewan, you'll have industry playing a much larger role in its contributions to the overall GHG greenhouse gas emissions. But in Ontario, our communities are really critical to be able to move them forward in low carbon strategies, moving them forward to be able to address the greenhouse gas reduction targets that we need to achieve for 2030 and 2050. And because over 60% of our Ontario's overall emissions come from our communities, with buildings being about almost 50%, kind of go from between 40 to 50%, transportation being about 40 to 50%, depending on the community. And then waste also plays a critical role from between 5 and 10% for waste. We cannot achieve our 2030 and 2050 targets without actually addressing the emissions from those sources. And what's really important is that we really need to empower local governments to be taking action. And your voice is so critical to driving the ambition across local governments. We also need to be doing that to making sure that the federal and provincial and municipal governments are all rowing in the same direction, because we all need to work together on this. So I did want to highlight some of the economic and climate change opportunities that we really need to ramp up. So one of the examples is municipalities getting their own house in order. This looks like developing, they have many municipalities in Ontario have corporate energy efficiency plans in place for their own facilities. We need to ratchet those up. Well, instead of achieving like 5 and 10% reductions, we really need to kind of make sure that those corporate energy plans are aligned with their climate emergency declarations and targets. And as such, really moving these plans from corporate energy efficiency plans towards corporate net zero emission plans. Another area where municipalities need to increase their ambition is in getting their own house in order in their fleets. A lot of fleet actions have been taking place. They would say about a decade ago, they were very popular in terms of right sizing, in terms of, taking fuel efficiency, driver training into consideration. I'd say that sustainable fleets plans have stagnated over the last little while, as they kind of, and as electric vehicles are increasing on opportunities, there's an opportunity to facilitate and the revitalize realization of those sustainable fleets plans. Municipalities play a really important role in the advancing the direction through their procurement practices. And one of that would be whether that's taking a life cycle costing approach. Municipalities have been have been behind in terms of they always seem to separate out their upfront costs from their operational costs and don't bring those two together. So really, there's a lot of movement amongst municipalities to take a total cost of ownership, taking capital as well as the operational cost overall into consideration before making your purchasing decisions. A number of other municipalities are also advancing renewable natural gas, either from their sewage treatment plants or from their organic waste collection, putting them in there through an anaerobic digester, producing renewable natural gas that they use to run vehicles or to generate electricity or feed into the grid. Another area that's really, really critical, and it's in every single municipal climate action plan, is advancing building energy efficiency retrofits. Almost all of our buildings will need to be retrofitted and bringing them to really achieving the deep reductions that we need to achieve. That would include, there's, certainly the opportunities on the economic and job creation opportunities associated with all of these retrofits. And in particular, one of the key reasons why the energy efficiency would be a job creation and economic development opportunity is that a lot of energy dollars that we spend at present doesn't stay within our communities. It leaves the community, leaves the province, and often sometimes can leave the country. So one of the key areas that's really important is that every dollar that we don't spend on energy, that we instead move towards energy efficiency, will actually result in job creation opportunities and local economic development. Because a lot of these jobs can't be outsourced, and a lot of these products can't be bought on Amazon. So take that, Jeff Bezos. Huge opportunities there. And it really does mean that we can keep some of those energy spendings within the local community. Certainly within new buildings, we really need to accelerate the movement towards net zero emission buildings. And green development standards is one mechanism that municipalities are using to advance that. We know that every single building that's not built to net zero emissions at this point in time will need to be retrofitted within 10 to 15 years, and it'll cost us a lot more and achieve a lot less when we retrofit it than if we built it and constructed it with net zero emissions in mind. Another area that I think is really important in building this up is like in our community livability, the climate change the challenges associated with like advancing active transportation plans. For the longest time, transportation planning within municipalities was about moving vehicles as quickly as possible. We really need to change that paradigm shift and moving it from moving vehicles to moving people. And really that means that we actually need to take into consideration our streets and how we allocate space within our streets in order to move people and not simply vehicles. I did want to highlight some local food plans that are in place, community gardening and urban agricultural policies. Those are all critical towards climate action as well. Certainly advancing freight transportation plans and a goods movement strategy is really important for municipalities. Investing in public transit. For the longest time, I'd say for the last oh, it's so sad, 20 to 30 years, we haven't invested our public transit. In the last decade, we've changed that. But we also know that COVID has been a real kick in the gut to our public transportation system. We also know that we have to increase our public transportation options for people to be able to provide them a viable option outside of their vehicles. So really, we need to kind of switch the paradigm. Instead of actually just focusing in on moving vehicles, we really try to kind of like prioritize active pedestrians and active transportation, moving into, certainly kind of the public transit, car sharing, and kind of, the transportation sharing, telecommuting, then moving to the single occupancy vehicle and addressing that at the last, but really prioritizing other transportation modal opportunities. Just also wanted to highlight green infrastructure. Low impact development is the LID. It's really kind of re-engineering ecological systems to serve as flood protection. And then also taking a really good look at what is the natural capital within our communities and what can we do to protect that natural capital rather than just turning it over to development and then having to kind of develop gray infrastructure that would serve to provide those ecological services that the natural capital provided. I did want to also highlight one of the important things is that it's really important for our municipalities and our communities to prepare for disruption. Huge disruptions are coming down the queue. There are going to be a lot of our energy system, which pretty much hasn't changed much for the last 50 years, is going to have a lot of disruption coming up with local opportunities and distributed energy, whether it be PV panels, whether it be geothermal, whether it be energy efficiency. All of these different types of opportunities are going to provide us a lot more options for how we meet local energy needs with local solutions. The sharing economy, and how can we use that to address our consumerist ways and also reduce our consumption. Also looking at innovative financing mechanisms to help deal with the upfront capital costs that's been a hindrance to advancing climate action, whether that be proper like PACE or LICs with regards to provide financing and loans to residents and businesses to undertake energy efficiency, which are then paid back from the energy savings. Autonomous vehicles are going to be something that's a disruption into the future. One of the key things that we have learned and all the research is showing is that for autonomous vehicles to actually be able to address a lot of our greenhouse gas, air pollution, and congestion issues, we really need to make sure that autonomous vehicles are shared vehicles, that they're electric vehicles from a clean fossil fuel free grid, and that we prioritize in our transportation and land use planning, prioritize those sharing vehicles ahead of single occupancy vehicles. The Internet of Things is something that's going to be really what role is smart cities going to play in solving a lot of our kind of energy use and climate challenges within our communities. And then I'm not sure exactly what 3D printing, but it was like, we really want to say, how does 3D printing play into our longer term climate energy efficiency retrofit goals that we have? Another really key area of action is really in advancing our municipalities' resilience to extreme weather and bringing a climate lens to our everyday decision making within municipalities. And what I mean by that is that it's really important for councils to understand what is the connection between this decision in front of them right now, and it's either how it's going to affect climate in terms of energy and greenhouse gas emissions, or how is it going to be affected by climate in either in the form of extreme weather, resilience to flooding, heat events, a number of different disruptions that are coming our way on that. So I wanted to take you on a really quick tour of some of the kind of actions that are taking place. And I do want to kind of highlight where we are right now within municipalities. We are getting actions taking place. We are getting a lot of pilot projects kind of taking these like projects taking place. What we really need to do is transfer them to all municipalities and all communities across Canada, scale them up so that it's not just the token greenie action, it's business as usual. And in that way, we can rise to our climate change challenge that's ahead of us. This is an example of a cogen facility in Hamilton. It's using the Woodward wastewater treatment plant, taking the sewage, producing biogas, and putting it into there to generate electricity, as well as feeding it into the natural gas grid. In Saanich, BC, they're using waste heat from their arena and from their sewage treatment plant to provide heating for the neighboring community. Another example, taking waste heat from the sewage treatment plant, feeding it into the district energy system, replacing natural gas with this waste heat. I love when those things that are normally just kind of sent off into the air, never be seen again, are actually turned into a useful, viable product that meets a need and replaces fossil fuels. Another example of this is the Drake Landing community in Okotoks, Alberta, using solar thermal and solar PV to take the solar energy in the summer and remove it from the buildings and storing it underground so that it can be then used in the wintertime, and vice versa, so that the coolness from the earth can be used to cool the buildings in the summertime. And as you can see, it's made a huge difference in terms of the natural gas requirements that these homes need to maintain their comfortable temperature. An example, a lot of municipalities are advancing turning landfill gas into electricity. Previously, they used to just flare it, burn it up so that it would reduce the methane and turn that into CO2, because methane is a much more powerful greenhouse gas. Nowadays, they're capturing that methane and turning it to generate electricity. Some of the examples of municipal policies that are advancing net zero emission buildings and higher performance buildings, green development standards, which are in place in Toronto, Whitby, Vaughan, Richmond Hill, Brampton, and Halton Hills. And one of the key things that is really important about this is it not only deals with the energy performance of the buildings themselves, but also looks at it from the perspective of how much precipitation is dealt with on site, how close are these developments to amenities, how close are they to public transit, active transportation routes, green space, a lot of the different metrics that can kind of be moved towards moving the sustainability of our new developments. Another important area is monitoring the performance of these new technologies and strategies. For example, on the left is permeable concrete, and measuring that to make sure that the models for what we think will be achieved is actually achieved when it's post-occupation. Another key area is that we know that if every building that we don't build to net zero emission will need to be retrofitted, and we want to avoid those retrofits. So a lot of work to taking net zero ready and net zero housing. And while there is mechanisms that we know that at present it will increase upfront capital costs over the lifetime of that building, and it'll pay for itself many, many times over through operational savings. So we just need to work with the developers and the purchasers to address the upfront capital costs, which is at this stage probably about $20,000 to get to net zero ready. And then the question is those savings will pay for themselves within a 10 to 15 years time frame. And that building is going to be around a lot longer than just 10 to 15 years. An area that has not received as much attention as it really, really deserves is rental housing. How do we increase the energy performance and reduce greenhouse gas emissions from rental housing, especially in many of those cases where it's the tenant who pays for the energy and the landlord is the one who needs to put the investments in the property to address the energy use of the building. One of the ideas for how this could take place is requiring energy disclosure. So landlords would have to disclose how much it costs the previous tenant to heat and with the electrical utilities, so they can take a total cost of rent and utilities into account when they make their decision on which place they're going to live in. An example of these types of programs is the Home Energy Loan Program in the City of Toronto. And right now we only have one home energy loan program in place, but we're going to have a lot more in the coming years. And a lot of municipalities are going to be advancing these programs. The example of how this works is that the homeowner is lent money to undertake energy efficiency retrofits. Then the homeowner pays back that loan as a surcharge on their property tax bill through their operational savings. I wanted to highlight some of the kind of City of Markham is just one example. A lot of municipalities are advancing PV and solar energy on their municipal facilities. This is just the example in Markham, but this is something that is taking place and we need to scale it up as much as possible. An example of this is another municipality using geothermal within their community center. Geothermal just takes the warm air or the cool air, depending on the season, from the ground, puts it through a heat pump to generate the heat to ramp it up to the temperature it needs, and in that way it's much more efficient than general electric heating, as well as certainly natural gas and no fossil fuel emissions if you come from a clean grid, because it's switching out fossil fuel and natural gas for the electricity. The Halifax Solar City is a really great program that the City of Halifax put forward, which is a turnkey model that is advancing solar thermal on Halifax resident properties, and again loaning the money to the residents, which is then paid back through their operational savings on their solar thermal. An example of another municipal policy that's where San Francisco required solar panels on new buildings, and then 1 week later Santa Monica followed. We need to advance a lot more of those types of policies within our communities here as well. An example is a Lethbridge bioplant taking waste products from agriculture, putting through an anaerobic digester to generate electricity. And then this is an example that I love the advertising that they've done for this, this is an example in Bristol, UK. They took the the sewage treatment plant, put it through the waste product from the sewage treatment plant, put it through an anaerobic digester, produced renewable natural gas, and then that is actually producing, running their public transit fleet. Gotta love that advertising. Love it. Growth management policies and plans. These are really, really critical, not just for our climate actions, but we know that there's a direct correlation between land uses and how much GHG emissions and energy uses is required. But in addition to that, we also know that from a financial sustainability perspective, we didn't end up in an infrastructure deficit by accident. We haven't maintained our kind of intensification and our densities that we need to pay for the rehabilitation of our infrastructure when it inevitably comes time that our infrastructure needs to be rebuilt. When you got low density greenfield development, you got to put in brand new infrastructure associated with it. And while we do have developer charges to pay for that, over the time period for the operations to service those types of communities, as well as rehabilitation when all the infrastructure needs to be improved, that needs to be having enough of a tax base to pay for that infrastructure reuse. And those intensification and building where there's already infrastructure in place is not only super, super important from our climate change goals and challenges that we have ahead of us, but also the financial sustainability of our communities as well. Active transportation plans, super important within municipalities, not only from the perspective of providing more equity in transportations, but also from the perspective that we really need to find ways to re-engineer physical activity back into our day-to-day lives. It's really important from a physical activity perspective and public health to be preventative about to building preventative health strategies in mind. One of the things that is always I found a little bit depressing is when we get a chance to rehabilitate a street and we end up building it the same way that it was before, which always seemed to provide priority to vehicles and not necessarily people. So one of the key things that we're really trying to advance is complete streets policies, that municipalities look at their complete streets policies to identify when there's opportunities and how they prioritize moving people rather than just simply vehicles. And one of the things I wanted to leave, I like to leave this little parting anecdote. One, I like stories. And two, I think that while we as a human species may not be the best at being the most proactive species in the world, we excel at being reactive. When a problem happens, we can all kind of come together and kind of help to address it and try and clean up that problem. But we all know that it's much, much smarter to prevent problems from happening in the first place. And we need to we kind of need to work our proactive muscles in order to advance that. So this is a story of Fudai, which is a prefecture about 500 kilometers north of Tokyo. It's a small population, about 3,000. And it's this mayor who served about 10 terms. And when he was young, he witnessed the death of half the town from the tsunami in 1933. And he vowed when after the tsunami in 1933, the government of Japan required prefectures to build floodgates to protect towns. The requirement for those floodgates was that they had to be only 10 meters in height. But the mayor knew that the previous tsunami reached a height of 15.5 meters. And so he decided that, yes, while it will cost us more, we are going to build it to the 15.5 meters high because of the fact that we know that we've already had a tsunami at that height, and it makes sense to protect ourselves from that. So while it costs a little bit more, it certainly, from the perspective, it certainly helps. There was only one person who was killed in the 2011 tsunami in Japan, and that was the boat on the other side of the ocean side of the tsunami floodgates. So it really, really works to protect that. And I'm just saying, it probably would have been better to be more proactive when you think of Fukushima and the costs associated with that nuclear meltdown as a result of that tsunami. Perhaps that would have been an appropriate place to build a little bit more resilient floodgates to protect that nuclear power plant. So I wanted to thank you so much for your leadership. I can't tell you how important and how much it's warmed my heart to see see the huge amount of momentum and action and calls for action that's coming from the youth of today. And I'm so thankful and I'm so proud of you all. I really want to thank you for your leadership. Your voices are so much more powerful than you realize. So please talk to your families, talk to each other, really try and, anything we can do to help you in terms of building your, please, that's my contact information. Please visit our website to get some more information on the resources that we have available, as well as the projects that we're doing. And while I am a bit of a Winnie the Pooh fan, I also wanted to kind of really kind of send that message. You guys are so much more braver than you believe. You're stronger than you seem, and you are way smarter than you think. So thank you so much for your leadership and for all of the calls for action that you're pushing out there. I can't tell you how important it is and how strong and how important your voices are. And I hope you have a wonderful time at the conference, and I hope you enjoyed this little story. And please let me know if you have any questions. Thanks and have a good day.
Thank you for listening to Gabriella Kalapos discuss municipal climate change. We hope that you were able to gain valuable insight and knowledge from this experience. If you wish to take climate action, don't forget to sign up for the project launch on Halton Climate Network's main page.